Welcome to another episode of Assess and Caress on Jay Leno's Garage. We have 3 cars. 2 of these are mine. We have 1 car from the Audrain Automobile Collection in Newport, Rhode Island. They were kind enough to send it out using reliable carriers, which get it safely here, and it goes right back to the museum. So that's we want to thank them and get a chance to visit that museum if you're ever back east. It's really quite amazing. Also quite amazing, our appraiser extraordinaire, Donald Osborne, or the prima Donald, as we call him here. Tell us what we have.
Jay, we have here 3 examples of British icons for every budget.
All right.
We have a 1931 Bentley 8-liter Saloon, a 1963 Jaguar XKE fixed-head coupe,
Right.
and a 1969 MGC GT.
Where do you want to start?
Let's start with the Jaguar.
All right. The Jaguar, as when pronounced correctly, fascinating car. Enzo Ferrari called this the most beautiful car in the world, and I think it was well deserved. You know, I never understood, when I was a kid, you'd have Aston Martin at about $1,000 or $2,000 more than an XKE, and that just seemed like an XKE that had gone to Eton or gone to college. It was a 6-cylinder, pretty close to the same horsepower. This was always great value for money. That's the thing about Jaguar. They were just fantastic. Twin cam, overhead valves, 6-cylinder, silky smooth. One of the great engines of all time. An engine that served Jaguar for almost 70 years, pretty much. It's pretty amazing. This is one of the few cars that's, I feel, more beautiful as a coupe than as a convertible. This one is in white, not my favorite color, but that's the great thing about the XKE. It does look good in any color. There are some cars, we talked about this,
that are very
some
color
Ferraris
sensitive.
you see that are red. It looks better in blue. Or the Jaguar, almost any color. It has the very sexy door that opens in the back. People who don't even like cars are attracted to this. A lot of times, I find women very much attracted to the XKE or any Jaguar because it features both male and female parts to it. It's sexy, but yet it has sort of masculine features like the haunches over the rear. Just a great design. Just a fabulous car to drive. 4-speed transmission. This one has a 3.8-liter engine, which many consider the best revving version of them all. I like them all, non-synchro. This is a car, a lady called me. I never met her. She told me she bought it brand new and once had it up to 80 miles an hour.
Holy cow.
Well, I just thought that was funny, you know. And they always tell you, don't buy something sight unseen. But she was asking $50,000 at the time, which was high at the time I bought it. But I thought, well, all right. I sent off a check. The car came. Oh, my God, the clock works. Everything works. She had it serviced at the dealer. I mean, she drove it and shifted it perfectly. The synchros, there's no synchro in first, but everything click. It's just a wonderful car. It's just been a great car. This is original paint. We've done a few things. We put a little wider wire wheels on it to get a little more road holding out of it, but that's about it. Air conditioning was not available. This has been a California car its whole life, so there's no rust in it. But it is exactly as it left the factory, and it's just a wonderful car.
The fixed-head coupe, as we agree, is the ultimate expression of the shape. And also, again, thinking about how cars, we talked about the Citroën DS in 1955. When this car was introduced in 1961, it was an absolute sensation. Just the shape was absolutely astonishing. And also following on, and this is a great, I won't say a controversy, but a great discussion among Jaguar enthusiasts about the fact that this was the successor to the XK150, which is a very different kind of car.
Right.
And when this finally went out of production and the XJS came in, that was also a very different kind of car than the XKE.
But none was as successful as the XKE. This is a classic case of first design is correct, like the first generation Mustang, like the first MGA, the first Jaguar. Later it became a 2+2 and the roof got higher and they covered the headlights and it just, this is purely its greatest form. This Series 1, 63 is my favorite year because I had a couple of years to get some of the bugs out. You never get all the bugs out of a Jag. I mean, it was sort of a joke. If you ever watched the popular TV show Mad Men, where the guy goes to kill himself in his Jaguar in the garage and it doesn't start, you know.
Well, yeah, there was always that joke that when you bought a Jaguar, you bought two, one to drive while the other one was in the shop.
Right, right. Yeah.
But nonetheless, I mean, again, these cars were reliable because they sold a lot of them. People used them as everyday cars. And I think that actually, interestingly enough, the reliability aspect has taken on a different shape when they became collector cars, because cars in general don't like to sit, and these cars in particular don't like to sit.
Well, it's interesting because these cars were reasonable when new and extremely cheap when secondhand. So consequently, people that bought them did not have the means or the expertise to maintain them properly. And that's how they got a bad reputation. Because anybody I know who has an XKE that is a collector that used them has no problems at all. You know, they've checked all the electrical connections and replaced wires and things where necessary, where they've been rubbing up against the chassis for 30 years. And they have no problems. It's really no more troublesome than any other car. But there are some basic inherent flaws, but that's another story.
But I also love the cleverness of the design of this car. For instance, you know, you think about the shape of the car, the lowness of the roof,
right,
and the width of the windshield. So you think, well, how can you clear it? Well, the answer is 3 windshield wipers.
Yeah, that always seemed very sexy at the time. Oh, you got an extra wiper.
But it's a fantastic solution.
Right, right.
You know, it's the kind of practical solution that a company that made winning race cars, you have to find solutions when you're racing a car.
Right.
And Jaguar was really terrific at that. And another thing, of course, which is so great about these early cars is in the interior. Now, one of the things you have done is that you've reupholstered the seats. And this is a car which really is a great example of what the Italians call conservato, which is my favorite kind of car. It's a car that's never been blown apart for a restoration.
Right.
It's never been left out in a field for a tree to grow through it. And the nice original paint shows a little bit of burn marks where it's been polished over the years.
Right.
But it just has this wonderful settled patina, like a wonderful favorite jacket.
Right, right.
But the things that need to be replaced, the seats wear out. You can't sit on springs. You can't have the filling coming out. So you reupholster them in the correct material, in the correct color.
Right.
And so you get this wonderful feeling of an object being loved and used. And of course, the interior of these early cars with the wonderful, the printed metal finish and the toggle switches and all this, just so incredibly, you know, the quintessence of an English sports car.
When I was in high school, my friend Greg bought one for $800 because that was what they were going for. It was a convertible. It caused him so many problems, he decided he was going to burn it down for the insurance money. So he drives it out to Palms Pond in Andover, Massachusetts, down a deserted road, pours the gas in. Just as he throws a match in, a cop car comes down. Hey, what's going on? He goes, oh, okay. Wait, what's my... He's so frustrated with that thing. He saw the can of gas. Yeah, he goes, all right, just don't try to claim that on insurance. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. All right, be careful you don't get out of the forest fire. Yeah, no problem, thanks. Let's call the fire department. Okay, fire department came, put it out, they dragged it away. He got nothing. Got nothing. He just, it's horrible. Let's take a look under the hood. Another thing.
Just before we do that, let's go back to the fact that your friend Greg bought an XKE Roadster for $800.
Yeah.
Now, it's also very interesting because today, the concept of buying a really interesting car for relatively little money is very strange to a lot of people. I bought my first Jaguar, a 1961 3.8 Mark II sedan, for $800. And there's a great story there because I ended up running the car out of oil and ruining the bearings on the engine. And so I had to have the engine rebuilt. Now it's going to be $1,500. So I said, okay, fine. Then I thought, well, while the engine's out, why don't you take care of a little bit of rust bubbles and the stills? Now it's going to be $1,500. I said, okay, great. And I thought, I'd have $3,000 to put in this $800 car. Yeah. So I traded it as it sat for a 1973 Pinto Squire wagon. So actually, it was a good deal because I then traded the Pinto Squire for a 1963 Jeep Wagoneer, which I sold for $1,200, so I actually made money on the $800 Jaguar.
Interesting.
So,
but you know, when you say a cheap car, $800 was really $8,000. And because you figure everything is 10 times what it was in the early 60s. So like when people say to me, oh, I found an old car, how much, $5,000? I go, that's a lot. Well, it's still a lot of money to me, but no, that's about what it is, right? I always sort of bristle when I look on Bring a Trailer and I see 2002 something, 60,000. I go, what? Because it's an old car. But that really is true. I mean, I worked at McDonald's for $1.25 an hour. And so $800 for a car, that's every
a lot of hours.
All the money you made all summer.
Yeah.
That was really it. So it really was not that cheap. I remember Duesenberg selling for $800 or $900, but Model Ts were $10.
Well, for me, that Jaguar was sort of a third of the price that I would have to pay for a new car.
Right.
So, that savings I was willing to take. But now that we've gone on from that wonderful excursion, let's take a look at that great XK engine.
Now, this is what it looks like under the hood. See, here's the other interesting part. When you had a car like this in New England, you had these louvers. And when it rained, you constantly soaked the engine. So, which would cause your exhaust manifolds to rust and your head to bubble and all the kind of things. So that's the great thing about living in California. This is as they came from the factory. Still has this piece here, this piece of phenolic material. Most people throw that away and just run the plugs straight the way they should, where they are without that holder. But this is what they look like when you got them new.
The wonderful triple SU carburetors. And I also love all of the attention, some of which was slightly difficult to maintain. For instance, the heat shield, the other thing which you get lost, the heat shield from the manifold to your brake reservoirs, which is not the most clever design because you don't really want to heat up the brake fluid.
Right.
And of course, when the car was new, it came with a nice asbestos shield, which was very effective, but obviously those got lost over the years. And it's also a really interesting thing that on a lot of cars that have not been restored, you can notice something. I don't know if we can quite see it on this car, but Jaguar painted the frames upside down so that the paint would drip. And so you have an upside down drip on the side rail of the paint, which is absolutely hysterical. But also, it looks like you're running the standard radiator in this car as well.
Yeah, this car runs fine. I'm running the standard fan, the two-bladed fan. This is the classic.
Debunking yet another myth.
Well, if you use it as it's intended, it's really very good. Don't hop it up. Standard compression ratio. Change your cooling fluids and whatnot, and you're fine. Yeah. Let's put this down.
And it is always surprising to think about what you said about Jaguars being built to a price, because today they seem like incredibly well-built and very detailed cars. But again, compared to an Aston Martin, compared to a Bentley, and things like that, they were in a totally different league. And William Lyons really was quite smart in creating his own market segment, which is absolutely brilliant. And of course, the desire to have a GT car like this was vast. And so how could someone who was slightly less successful than the typical Jaguar owner have one?
Right.
Let's take a look at our MG.
Okay. This is a car I lusted after my first year in college because living in New England, I had my MGB and the top leaked and, the windows didn't seal. And there was always a cold breeze on the back of your neck and all kinds of, whereas this was a fixed head, had a heater. Oh, I just thought it was like the great, and there was some practicality. You had a back seat and you could put someone back there or at least a suitcase or whatever. And I just thought this was the most wonderful car. You got all the benefits of the MG and the MGB, MGA with, the convenience of weather sealing and all that type of stuff. Oh, I just thought these were the greatest cars.
I too fell madly in love with the MGB GT from the moment I first saw one. And of course, also me being a fan of design and of Italian design. Of course, this hardtop was designed by Pininfarina.
Right.
So they did a restyling of the MG for the GT. And I just thought this was the coolest thing in the world. I didn't really want to have an Aston Martin, which I couldn't afford anyway, but I thought one day I'm going to have an MGB GT and it's just going to be the absolute end of the world. And I came to one of those moments where I met my hero and he had feet of clay.
Right.
I had the opportunity to drive one of these from Portland, Oregon to Reno, Nevada. And I thought, this is really interesting, but okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Then I had the opportunity to drive this, the 6-cylinder version, and I thought, holy cow, this is the answer. Back in the day, there was lots of complaints about the fact that, well, the MGC was too nose heavy and didn't handle the way the B did and all of that. It was comparing it to that. The chassis can certainly handle it, and this car handles wonderfully.
I bought a Lotus Elan from a lady whose husband passed away, and she had one of these and that, and she offered me this, and I had read all that about nose heavy, basically the same horsepower as the 4-cylinder. I realized with a little bit of effort, you get a lot more power out of it. But yeah, much like the 6-cylinder version of the Traction Avant, which I like better than the 4-cylinder because you can cruise at 60 or 70 on it, you know. I realized I probably should have done it, but I had just read so much bad press, and they really didn't, they sold for less money than the regular 4-cylinder, you know. And
Absolutely,
I thought,
they sold
oh,
at a discount
I guess
because
they're not
of their,
very good.
because of their reputation. And
Right.
you talk about the power differential was not much, but it was the delivery of that power. The way you could use the power in this car was so different than that of the 4-cylinder. And this 69 is again at that wonderful point with an MG where it still has enough of the feeling of the early cars with the small bumpers and the interior that has got improved seats, and it's now got the padded dash rather than that wonderful metal dash, but nonetheless it still has the feel of a traditional English car. So let's take a look under the hood at this wonderful 6-cylinder marvel.
Or boat anchor. Oh, it opens from the front. That's a long motor, isn't it? It looks like an 8-cylinder.
The marvel is the fact that it actually fits in that engine compartment. Again, they didn't have to do any stretching of the chassis to put it in.
Right.
And therein lies another tale, which of course, they wanted to do another deal with Donald Healey, but he refused to have a badge engineered Healey in an MG.
Right.
And so he pulled out and he ended up doing the Jensen Healey instead. And more's the pity, because it would have been really interesting to have a Healey version of the hardtop MG.
Yeah, it's so funny. I don't know why I passed on at the time. I just had read, I never really read anything good about it. It always seemed to be a huge disappointment. And by 69, you had these just awful smog rig that just choked the engines to death. They ran so lean, they got hot. So it just seemed more cumbersome and not well thought out. You know, the Japanese really thought out the emission situation well, whereas Americans and English and everybody else just did a quick fix to get it out the door, you know.
Yeah, when you think about the fact that this car was on the market at the same time as the Datsun 240Z. And you can tell why Datsun had the great success they had with that car, because that was a totally modern interpretation of the 6-cylinder GT car.
Well, let's go to a modern version of a classic car.
Indeed, and in fact.
A car so ahead of its time.
This is one of my favorite cars in your entire collection. And it's such an incredibly magnificent car for a number of reasons. First of all, obviously as the pinnacle of the WO Bentleys in terms of engineering development. And also the fact that so many period Bentleys, so many Cricklewood Bentleys were built with saloon bodies, and so many have lost them for touring bodies, and this is just a magnificent car. It's so incredibly beautiful.
Well, I like to think I saved this car. This car was originally found in Brazil. It was an ambassador's car. It was used as a chicken coop. Somebody did a wonderful restoration on it. When I looked at it in the late 80s and the early 90s, I was bidding against someone who wanted to convert it into another Le Mans replica. Throw this body away, because why did you want a big 4-door Bentley when everything was sport? And this is really just 30 years ago. I mean, I guess when you're my age, that just seems fairly recent. But, but yeah, no, it's interesting. So I told the guy I wanted to preserve it, keep it. There were some engine problems that had to be sorted. Yeah, there aren't any of these left. Even when Bentleys were collectible and going for $1 million, people are still buying these and cutting them up. It seems hard to believe nowadays, because in the early days of Pebble, the idea was you'd have tweezers to take the blades of grass in between the tread, and you'd chrome everything and make it look better than new, as opposed to just new. This was the car meant to take on Rolls-Royce. This is the car that scared Rolls-Royce to death, quite frankly. It's an 8-liter Bentley. It's a modern engine, overhead cam, 4-valve. Incredibly fast.
220 horsepower.
220, and you can cruise at 70 or 75 in this, which I do all the time. You can drive it just like a modern car. You have power mechanical brakes, which work perfectly. You would think they were hydraulic brakes. It just works amazingly well. When Bentley went bankrupt, Rolls-Royce bought Bentley to get this car and then shelve it and put it away because it was so far superior to the Rolls-Royce. It was meant to cross continents. You get on a boat, take it across the channel, go through France, Germany, get to Italy, have your vacation, drive back. I mean, it really was a version of this. The Blue Train that raced the famous Orient Express across Europe to see which could get there quicker, and this did. Yeah, it's a wonderful driving car, huge down-filled chairs rather than, I mean, they're
It's a
little
gentleman's
chairs.
club that goes 100 miles per hour.
Yeah, it really is. It really is just a fascinating, fascinating automobile. Very railroad-like. W.O. Bentley was worked for the Great Northern Railroad, and he was an engineer for them. So the overhead cam normally would be ridden by a belt in modern days or a chain. This was driven by conrods, which means like on a train, now it goes like this with the train. It'd be up there, and it drove the overhead cam, so it was silent, and you adjust the valves by putting washers in between, the conrods and then oil would get between it and sort of cushion it. So, yeah, just a wonderful car.
When you think about both the engineering solutions and the fact that Bentley was taking its sporting prowess in terms of chassis and brakes and steering and applying them to the ultra luxury market, there was no comparison with the Rolls Phantom 3.
The comparison would be with the Duesenberg.
Exactly.
This would be the American equivalent. And I've got both, and they're both interesting. I like this because it's a 4-speed. I like Duesenberg because it's a modern straight 8. Duesenberg had more power, more torque, but that was a 3-speed. See, every Duesenberg left the factory with a 4-speed transmission. Every one of them broke, couldn't take the power of the engine. So recall, I think it's a white truck version of a 3-speed. And back in America, people like 3 speeds rather than 4 because one less gear to shift. Oh, that's pretty good, isn't it? You know, that was the idea. In fact, in Duesenberg, you could put it in third, pull up to a light, put the clutch in, and then pull away again in third if you wanted to. It had that much power.
Well, and for a long time, that was also the mark of a luxury car.
Right.
How low could it pull in top gear?
Right.
To make sure that the passengers were as undisturbed as possible. The other thing, of course, is the fact that for a car in this class, this is also clearly meant to be a driver's car, although I'm sure many owners of 8-liter Bentleys were driven by their chauffeurs. But this is a car that the owner of the car would not mind if the chauffeur sat beside him and he or she drove himself.
Well, that's interesting you say that because it was an era of owner, driver, chauffeur. Duesenberg made a number of cars like that, like the Winchester. It had a partition, but the seat was big enough so if the owner chose to drive, you could put the partition down and you wouldn't know it was there. So there was a whole era of guys that made money on Wall Street and all that, you know, right before the crash when a lot of these were designed. But yeah, the Depression is what put this out of business. They only built 100 of these. I've got 3 of them, and I think they're
You're hoarding.
One of the greatest. Oh, thank you. I wish I could. Yeah.
Well, one of the things also, again, you know, me and style. And one of the things I really love about this car also is the style. It's got a body by H.J. Mulliner, I believe you said. And it also has a sense of proportion that if you saw a photograph of this car and we weren't standing next to it, you'd have no idea what the scale of this car was.
Right.
It could be a small car, it could be a big car, because the lines are so incredibly balanced. It's like my favorite of the Bugatti Royales, the Kellner Coupe, which does not look like this vast thing. It looks like a really beautifully proportioned car.
Right.
It also has, and a lot of the Bentley sedans of this period have this in common, the windshield is rather narrow and the roof is rather low for the car. It gives it a very sort of sporting, rakish look.
And sinister, yeah.
But not at all enclosed inside. There's enough light inside so you don't feel like you're riding in a tank.
This has a sunroof.
Wow.
Yeah, this has a sunroof. A Duesenberg, which many people believe was the longest wheelbase at 153, this is 156. So you've got a few inches on that as well. It is an enormous car. It's just, when you get out on the road, you go, oh my God. And there's no power steering or anything, but it's not bad. I mean, it's 70 miles an hour. You just, wow, am I real? I mean, I would check it against my GPS because, well, I can't be going. And no, I was. It's pretty accurate, yeah.
It's absolutely astonishing. And again, the idea that this car was created at a time when things were not going particularly well. Bentley, unfortunately, was up against the wall. The fact that it scared Rolls-Royce into killing it.
Right.
There's just so much about this. And of course, you think about one of the great what ifs. What if Napier had succeeded in buying the company
Right.
and continuing to develop this and bring it to the market? What would the market of the 1930s in Britain and the world look like?
Yeah, well, probably not good because war was pending. I mean, Hitler was encroaching in 1933. There were rumblings, this is not going to get better.
Rolls-Royce still managed to sell over 700 Phantom 3s.
Right, right.
So they certainly could have sold more than 100 of these.
Well, that's true, that's
Yeah.
true. But, you know, it's interesting, though, because especially in England, you had the Bentley boys and all those guys. They liked performance, but it was rather, you know, the upper class was, they don't want something that's loud and makes noise, something that's elegant and moves quickly. You know, so I'm not sure Bentley's sporting pretensions would have really aided in the sale of this.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that because to me this is like a 1931 version of the Maserati Quattroporte. It's this really fast, comfortable car. And yes, Bentley would have had to have slightly repositioned itself in the market, but I think it could have been something that could have been quite brilliant because they would have been, frankly, alone with Duesenberg in marketing
Right.
cars in this space.
But see, I think rich people, well, some rich people said go faster. I think more said, whoa, slow down. So I think the Rolls-Royce would be more, much like Packard outsold Duesenberg. Packard was strong and silent. Duesenbergs were raspy, you know. Well, I'll give you a classic example. When I worked at Foreign Motors in Boston, we got a red Corniche with cognac interior convertible. We had it for 18 months, couldn't sell it. We sent it to California, it sold in 2 weeks. Okay, because nobody in Boston, a red Rolls-Royce, oh my, and a convertible, oh, it was just old money, didn't want to stand out, you know.
The difference between Boylston Street and Coldwater Canyon.
Right,
Yes,
exactly, exactly.
Yeah. So let's take a look at the heart of an 8-liter Bentley, this amazing engine.
Now, the fascinating thing about this car is this was built when technology was expensive and labor was cheap. What do I mean by that? You know, technology was expensive and labor was cheap. Well, look at how many nuts you have holding this manifold on. If you're paying a guy 10 cents an hour and you don't have to pay health and welfare and all he gets is a watch after 20 years, you can afford to have manpower over technology. Once technology came in and would replace man in terms of saving money. But as you can see, that's why labor on these is so expensive. There is no cylinder head here. This is a solid block. You have to come up from the bottom if you want to get to the valves. Everything is an engine out job. See this fan belt? This fan belt, you hook together those pieces because you have to pull the engine out to put the fan belt on if it was a breakable fan belt, as they say. You see the crankshaft pulley is on the inside of the frame, so there's no way to get the belt on. You have to pull the engine out, lift it up. To get the engine out, you got to take the body off because you got to get the fender. I mean, it's.
But again, it's one of those things that
Yeah.
also speaks to Bentley's racing past and the
Right.
fact they wanted to make things durable, and the things that you had to service during a race, they had to be accessible.
Right, right.
So, and also, of course, this is still the time when the owners had chauffeurs who did more than drive the car around.
Right.
They were responsible for the very regular and very intensive maintenance that these cars
Yeah,
required.
just intensive is the key word. But if you look at this, you'll see that. You'll see the crankshaft pulley is inside the frame, which means there's no way to get this belt on if it was not a hook
segmented
together.
belt,
Yeah,
yeah.
segmented belt.
But you know, that's one of the things that you love about these cars. You enjoy working on them as much as you enjoy driving them. So you drive the car for an hour and then come in back here to the garage and work on it for 3 hours. And
Exactly.
You're a happy guy.
Yeah, there you are. Well, shall we go over all these?
Let's go over these. All right, Jay, so let's recap. We've got our 1931 Bentley 8-liter Saloon, our 1963 Jaguar XKE fixed-head coupe, and our 1969 MGC GT. Yep. Which of these cars has had the highest percentage increase in value in the last 5 years?
The 5 years is the killer. If it was 20 years, it would definitely be this, because I paid about $250 for this. It had some engine problems. Now I see them going for well over $1 million. XKEs since about 2010 have just gone nuts, but that's 2010. I paid $50,000 for this, and I thought that was high, but okay at the time. Now they're $150,000, $200,000. The MGT, I don't know. I mean, I passed on one 15 years ago because it just didn't seem like it'd be too much trouble. Let's see. All right. Well, these are, in the last 5 years, they've come up a little bit. I go XKE as number one, I think, just in the last 5 years, because I've just seen them go nuts. The MG, I'm not sure. I still think there's a lot of sort of ill feeling or bad reputation, negative perception of that. I would go this number one, that number two, that number three, but I don't know. Could be wrong. What do you got?
You wrong? How could that possibly
I know, it
be?
seems ridiculous.
Well, Jay, 5 years ago, an MGC GT would have cost about $35,000, and today it's about $40,000.
Okay.
So nobody cared about them for a long time, and now they're cars that have some value.
Right.
The E-Type, and an E-Type fixed head. The Roadsters really went crazy and got amazing numbers. You and I prefer the shape of the fixed head. Market gets crazy about convertibles. But 5 years ago, a car like this might have been about $225,000.
Really? Wow.
Yes. Now it would be $295,000.
Okay.
And especially a car like this because people are becoming more appreciative of original cars as opposed to totally blown out, restored, better than new cars. The Bentley. Again, with the attention on the market for Bentleys so focused on the blower cars and replica Le Mans cars and all that, people are now beginning to realize that the very rare 8 liters and especially very attractive saloons like this are really something worth preserving and paying attention to. So 5 years, this car probably would have been about $825,000. Now it would be $1.2 million.
All right, so this would be the winner.
That's the winner of the appreciation sweepstakes.
Yeah, I thought it was a toss-up. You know, the 5 years is what throws me off, because I thought I have seen Bentleys come down, actually, in the last couple of years. As everybody that wants one got it out of their system, they got one, they moved on to the next thing, you know. And only real collectors would want this model. So it kind of stayed around. Why not get the sporty one? Yeah, you're right, you know. I'm glad to hear that because it just increases the value of mine. But I thought for sure it would be this. I didn't realize these are going to even as much as $225,000. I mean, I see them on Bring a Trailer for $85,000 to $105,000.
The range in every car today is wider than ever.
Right.
But you can't replace originality.
Right.
The fact that this is an early car also makes it more desirable. And going back to the Bentley, it's about a growing sophistication and maturation in the vintage Bentley market.
Right,
As you said, people first became interested in them and thought, oh, I want to be a replica boy Le Mans racer. And then they realized, wait, what is the real historical interest in these cars and what can I really do with it?
Yeah, maturation. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, fellas, that'll be great. Let's get one that maturates. That'll be fantastic. Well, all right, interesting, Donald. Like, I figured it'd be one of those, but at least I own the two most valuable, and that's really the most important part.
But you were not correct.